Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And we're starting to present our new series that is coming about, which is on ancestral healing. And I'm introducing my co-host, Ms. Andrea Brunswick. We may have another individual coming today, but if not, guys, chime in. Oh, here she is right now. Here's Miss Mary. Mary, how we doing?
Hi, it's Marie. How are you?
Marie, I do apologize. Thank you for joining us. I know it's extremely early where you're at right now, so I'm so thankful that you showed up. We was just going through a brief introduction of what we're going to be presenting as we move forward. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're just going to be talking about soul wounds and unconventional losses, an introduction to our new 8-week series, Ancestral Healing. And so I'm truly excited. And before we go forward, this is my co-host Andrea.
Hi, Mary.
Marie. So as I was explaining to everyone, we're going to be diving deep into a different level of healing, because sometimes people don't think about these things, right? And the idea came on a healing, on a grief journey that I was on, and I started thinking, and I was talking with Andrea. I was like, do you ever feel as if you're often paying for things that you've never done before, right? And then it dawned on me, what if we are carrying traumas from our ancestors? And so a lot of people have posed the question. A lot of people are having a hard time wrapping their head around it. And I thought to myself, do we carry those things through our blood? Because they're blood ties. And so before we get into the discussion, I wanted to take a little bit and let you introduce yourself and tell people where you're from, Marie.
Oh, thank you, Tony. And hi, Andrea. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Those listening, my name's Marie Ferguson, and I'm tuning in all the way from Australia. I am a feminine embodiment leader. I also am an international author. I have a master's in education, an advanced breathwork facilitator, and I have, like what Tony was saying, through grief, being activated through a lot of remembrances. And I feel that when we think about our blood and our DNA, we do carry lineage, trauma, and gifts. Considering if we think about epigenetics and our DNA and the wisdom that's stored in our blood, we have 14 generations that we can access of intergenerational trauma and healing. So we have 7 on our matriarchal line, our mother's line, and we can go back 7 into our father lineage. And so all of that, knowing that, we can alchemize that when we become aware of it in our own experiences, is really powerful. So I love this conversation.
Thank you.
I just have to say something, Mary. Like, my goodness, when Tony said that you are dialing in from Australia, and it's something crazy like 4 a.m. your time, you have no idea how grateful I am to you, and I'm so grateful to Tony, because this just sparred from a conversation when I was a guest on his awesome podcast. So I'm excited to get this party started.
So, now let's dive into the conversation. I do have a question, and I just want to get everybody's opinions of this. In your own words, how would you define a soul wound? And so, anybody, if you want to chime in, go ahead. If anybody have any questions or comments, please go ahead, put those in the comment section, and we'll get to those as we go. But, I was thinking about soul wounds, right? And if we think about history, and I began to trace a lot of the traumas, like going past generational traumas and going, a little bit deeper and start thinking about it. We bring in slaveries, we bring in wars that have happened, right? Our fathers, our mothers, the things that they've gone through. But let's go a little bit deeper. Right? Let's go a little bit deeper. What about their grandparents and their grandparents before them? I mean, it's a trace, right? But and this is just my thoughts on it, in order to truly heal on that level, you have to understand what they've gone through and what's been passed down. So what I mean by soul wounds, we often, if you have ancestors that were slaves, you know, and I'm only speaking from my opinion. If you have ancestors that were slaves, can you imagine what they've gone through and what they passed down to their children and so forth and so forth? And so that's what I mean by a soul wound, because your soul will still tell that story through your actions. And we never really understand where they're coming from. And so that's what I mean, like healing those right there. And so I want to get your thoughts on those.
It's a really beautiful, deep question. I feel like soul wounds, when we think deep into even the primal core nature of human existence and feeling, it's these feelings of alone, unworthy, not good enough. And these core wounds that humanity carries, that through circumstance, through experience, through actions that we feel ripple in our daily lives, in our own, I suppose, actions and how we show up in the world. It can be a lot of deep lessons of inner emotional and spiritual healing for the self, for the soul, to tap into. And it's, if everything is a reflection of God, source, universe, whatever people want to call it, it's the same, omnipotent source of love and creation. Then when we can notice in ourselves, in others, in how we're feeling, there's like really deep lessons to learn through the depth and the richness of these woundings that gets to then be such a big gift. And I feel grief and rage, which people seem to suppress a lot in society, this deep feeling that, we're not allowed to really show to the world, has a lot of that deep core soul wounding that is just yearning to be felt and expressed in whatever way, for like humanity to like feel and see what it is for that feeling. And I know this seems really big, but even in our own experiences, I feel like some of that wounding of knowing that you're never truly alone, that you are always fully healed, and to come back into that place in this polarity of existence and to integrate that depth of these woundings and this feeling. Like our ancestors did the best they could at their time. Like my lineage, I've got on my mother's side, my mother's Filipino. So there's a whole Asian, Spanish, Chinese lineage there. And my dad's side, I think there's Irish and I don't know, there's other things there. But in my own experiences and my own awakening journey, a lot of those woundings came through in my own experiences that I'll share a little bit more later. So I suppose that's my take on that deep question.
Okay. Andrew, you want to touch on that?
Well, yeah, because you know what, Murray, first of all, I love what you said, and it's so true. And how when Tony and I were talking on his podcast, and I was bringing things up as my own journey has been expanding and God has been taking me in places, I could see and relate to things within my own lineage. So my lineage is Judaism. And when I hear things, like I've always joked along my way about being that wandering Jew or being lost in the wilderness, but they're 400 years and they're 40 years in the wilderness until they came. And I was like, I could really start to relate. And I wasn't even thinking in terms of like the soul wounds of it, but just in the things. And as a kid growing up, my family was never affected by the Holocaust, but I have friends and family members who their family had been through the Holocaust, and they would always talk about the traumas that they themselves as children felt, right? So then Tony and I mean, because it's a very deep rabbit hole that I think if we wanted, we could all go through. So as a coach, it's always been the soul that I've been working with my clients on, and even with myself, and recognizing how at times my soul just feels like a big block of Swiss cheese, and there's all these massive holes in it that we need to close. And sometimes we think, or we thought we've done the healing, right? But then it's the soul wounds. It's the lineage of those wounds that we never really address. And one thing, Maria, I just want to say, like, when you brought up the whole rage, you're right. We have learned that it is so politically incorrect. And in order to be politically correct today, we need to suppress these things. And I think, hence, if we really open our eyes and take a look at the world around us, we can see this chaos, and it's coming from the ancestral wounds of our souls. That's just that's a little bit of my take on this.
I love that.
Let me touch on that a little bit, and share a little bit of the journey that I was on, because my grief has showed up one day, and I've learned to sit with it, right? I've learned to sit within the hurricane of it and just pick out the pieces that are still there that I needed to go back in and heal, because when you go through loss, when you go through trauma in present day, even as a child, we carry those things, right? And so we have to go back in order for us to show up as our authentic self and heal. So we're not bleeding over everyone else. And during this journey, I was sitting there and something like, I always felt a disconnect in my grief, like something was always missing. And so as I was sitting in my grief hurricane, I was sitting there and something just said, turn your head. So when you're in there, your mind will go in different places. You allow your subconscious mind to take you to a level, but then if you can, allow your unconscious mind to take you to a different level, deeper, see where you're really connected to. And I allowed myself to do it because, I'm all about the healing. How deep does it go? It's my question. And so I began to go down this path, saw my life, and I went through this door. And when I went through this door, there was people in there, but they didn't look like us. They were like, they were spirits. And I just remember hearing the words, help me break the chain. Help me break the chain. I went, whoa, what does that mean? Well, okay, how do I break the chain is my question. And it went, I need peace. Oh, whoa, hold on. Okay, tell me what I need to do. It told me, you have to forgive me. Okay, you're going to have to elaborate it with me a little bit more. And it took me on a different journey. And as I sat there, I went, I forgive you for the things that you've done and for the things that you've passed on. The chain broke. And in present day, it was like all of this stuff was released and life began to change for me almost instantaneously. And I was like, oh, I just broke a chain. Okay, let's go back in here and explore a little bit more, right? And so that's where that journey really began. And I was always curious, are there other people out there that are knowledgeable about these things? And if so, let's
talk about it.
Other people and can get a grasp of it and maybe start to connect those dots as well.
I love that, Tony. A few months ago, actually, I had a very vivid dream of some friends, and I stopped dreaming for a while so my body could rest and heal. So when I dream, I really pay attention. And a friend of mine said, you're here to break the bonds of scarcity. And that just resonated. You're here to break the bonds of scarcity. And I don't normally talk like that. So I'm like, okay. And the fact that it stuck with me, it's like, okay, these bonds of scarcity that are ingrained in fear and ingrained in lack. We see that, unfortunately, our society and institutions and the government structures keeping us in these bonds of scarcity. Because if we think back, even, past the 14 generations, if we could keep going, our birthright is abundance. Our birthright. And we come in as babies just desiring everything. And we come in pure and wholesome. And even though there are those things that can come through the bloodline, the essence of who we are is abundant. We cry, we get what we need, you know, and that pureness of existence. And when we start to remember who we are and how powerfully and humbly big our soul is, it's almost like when you remember not only your past lives, if you have past lives here on earth, but for me, it took me back even beyond that. And this search for going beyond, well, where are these woundings or this yearning or this searching stemming from? I remember going back to God. I remember going back to, you know, other realms where I was in this beautiful existence for thousands and thousands of years. And there was this yearning and this calling to explore, to expand. And so a lot of, I suppose, things I noticed with my relationship for me to heal was in past lives, I left my husband a lot because we were soul union. We were together and we've had many lifetimes together and apart. But every time it showed me leaving my family because of this calling. There was a calling to expand and a calling to learn and grow and evolve. And that was part of my journey. And to realize that, I had to then come back and do a lot of inner work and relational work to help him and to help myself in that relationship. I mean, we've been together for 18 years, married for 14, and we knew each other for 28 years. So when we were children. And a lot of the wounding when we were young and growing up and when we got married, like it was beautiful, like you just know. But I know I kept going because I have a background in teaching. I would always go to the kids. I would always go and do this. And so he always felt like I was leaving him for other things, like everyone else is more important than me. And I had a lot of work to do to realize the sovereignty in myself and my choices, but also I'm here to learn union and I'm here to learn to be more in harmony with that so that I can lead from a balanced feminine and masculine energy within myself, the yin and the yang. This world, this existence is one of duality, and to be okay with these things and know that that's also his story and his healing within our relationship, that we then get to shift together and grow together. And he gets to come with me this time when I choose to go, and it's still his choice. And so I suppose with that wounding of leaving, the abandonment that I was doing to him, in realizing that, that was really powerful for me to then, you know, make choices or to go deeper within, you know, I need to do that and do this. And I think still in the choosing, like I went to Bali last year to dive deeper. Something was calling me there. And there was a lot of grief I was processing after going through 3 miscarriages back to back in a 9-month period about 3 years ago. So there was like pretty much a 2.5-year grieving, rage, identity shift process for me to come back into my womb, to come back into my body and anchor in all of this richness of emotion and feeling, which was bloody hard. I was going to swear then, but I felt like I was dying, and it was like this phoenix rising out of the ashes and continually. So I think to diverge as I do, that's kind of, you know, these lessons for self is really, really interesting to reflect on. So we can then grow and evolve, and we'll go, well, what else is there to break within the self? So you come back into that fullness.
I definitely love that. Do you have any questions that you want to ask, Andre?
Well, yeah, I do, because I would love to hear how you define unconventional losses and how our ancestors play a part in it. And I think you started to touch on that. So if you don't mind, Marie, I would really love for us to go now, start removing some more veils and dive deeper.
Yeah. I think the piece around loss, like I've had a very blessed life. You know, my mother left the Philippines because my dad was in the army. So even I think back to her now as an adult going, wow, she lost a whole sense of belonging to come to a country that she didn't know and to come with a baby, which was me, that was 3 months old. So her sense of safety, belonging, all the things, you know, and she told me a lot of stories before I get back into mine that really anchored a deeper understanding of also where parts of my loss and sense of self stemmed from. Because if we think about the womb space, your grandmother, your mother, and yourself, if you are a female, are all in your grandmother's womb. So the first 3 lines of epigenetics is like the first 3 ancestral lineages, your mother, your grandmother, are immediately in your field. So my mother was given away at 3 years old, again abandoned, because it was too hard to feed her in the Philippines. So lack, can't feed you, or you're gonna die. And then she did die. You know, she had working the Carabao, so the big buffalo with her cousins. She fell off a cliff. And when she told me that story, I had a glimpse, like I remember seeing her like I was an angel looking down. And like when she told me this many years ago, it was like I was telling her she needed to choose to live. And I know it sounds weird, but then as an adult, I like, as she was telling me the story, which she never had done earlier, it was like, oh, she needed to choose that so then I could come through and my brother can come through so we could do the work now. And so then she left that place at 10 years old to survive. And so as an adult, really hearing and understanding the strength and courage now was a beautiful flip, because growing up as a teenager, I hated her. We were like fire and ice because she was so protective over me. And again, having a very heavy Catholic Christian upbringing, I was growing up with like, God is going to punish you if you do the wrong thing. Girls need to shush and shut up and do this. So there was this whole heap of expectations, generational gap, and intergenerational trauma growing up. So I always felt disconnected to it. I loved her. I love her so much. But, you know, as a teenager, when you're trying to figure out who you are, there was abuse as well, you know, because she was never taught how to love unconditionally. And so as an adult, particularly when I had my daughter, this piece around unconditional love really was such a big lesson to anchor in. And my daughter's 8 now, and it's still a big lesson. But to come back to the losses, when I experienced my first miscarriage and then my second miscarriage and my third miscarriage, there was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of anger that came through and grief that I'd never felt before, because I was, you know, so protected and given a lot of things and had a beautiful education. And I'd never really had anyone die around me that I personally was connected to. And for my body to experience that, the pain, like, and that again is a taboo subject that women and men don't even talk about because they don't know how to. And so that piece around the losses and me feeling so angry at God, like, why me? I'm such a good person and I do so much for my family and the people around me. And I would, you know, this grieving process and experiencing loss after loss after loss really anchored me into a place of understanding and richness now that I can relate to other people in a different and more empathetic and compassionate way and an understanding that I never could have fathomed before because of that experience. And I found even with these losses in my healing journey of coming back into my body, coming back into softening, because I was always go, 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 heavily in my masculine energy, and the softness in my feminine, in the feeling, the expression, was coming back online. And I remember one night in bed when I was dealing with the loss, I went back to work 2 weeks after to teach dance and drama. And after my first miscarriage, I lost a lot of blood. And the doctors were like, they kind of looked after me, but it was like a little bit of care. But the trauma and the emotional and spiritual support I needed wasn't there. And even though my husband was there like a solid rock, he was doing all the things, there was something else that I felt so lost within myself. I didn't know who I was. Like I did die. A part of me and the mother that I thought I was going to be, the woman who I thought I was meant to be, was so broken because I felt alone. I felt like no one understood me. I was like, is this what happens to every woman when they go through this? And my first one was very traumatic. And like, it was such an awakening into the suffering that I needed to experience in order to choose not to be in that suffering anymore, because that's a choice. And this is part of the breaking of the bonds.
But do you think, Marie, sorry to interrupt, but do you think that we recognize that it's a choice for the suffering?
I feel like the ego mind and the feeling can come in, and like you said, Tony, you had to sit with yourself in the turmoil of it all. And in sitting with myself, a lot of wisdom started seeping in a little bit more in the silence, in the stillness. And that's the feminine essence, allowing rest. And it was through the rest, a lot of my grandmother came through. A lot of work in doing breath work, coming back into breathing life back into my body, then activated a lot of beautiful ancestral wisdom. And I remember it through my healing process and choosing to then do breathwork training. It was like most of us, when we get into these feelings of panic and anxiety, we're not breathing properly, because then we're like, and of course, then the body is like over hyperventilating and working harder. And for us to really go deeper into spirit, into soul, we actually have to calm our bodies and our minds and our hearts to then allow spirit, ancestors, God to communicate with us. And so the lineage pieces with the loss, I had a whole line of women upon women upon women upon women. And I didn't do much ancestral work then, but I felt like there was a backing of feminine essence and power, like all behind me. Like it was like this piece of like, now, the feeling of what we went through, and you're here to heal it all. And like you said, Tony, in your example, it's like, boop, you break that bond, you break that chain. And it was like my existence here, like they've been waiting for someone like me and my family to do that. And all of us now, if you're listening to this, yes, you have the power to do that for your lineage behind and the future. So my daughter doesn't get to live all of that. And by me doing this work now, it gets to break it for generations to come. And that's how powerful and potent we are when we allow that feeling to come through. And it's only been recently my patriarchal ancestors came through this year. The men, like my dad has always been there, but he kind of went away with the army. But there was this piece like of rage that came through when I did another process in a sacred space. And there was this piece of like, where were you? And I was angry. There was this deep anger for all the men. And I was like, where were you? Like, where were you to protect us? Where were you? And there was this deep piece of forgiveness that had to drop in. And they were like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And then there was this sense of like forgiveness for self, forgiveness for all of the lineage pieces that really anchored in. And that was through like breath work through the body. And so anyway, there's some big pieces, but those losses I feel like get to be forgiven through us.
Yeah. I want to elaborate on that because you touched on a lot of great points. And I want to add to that a little bit, something that I thought about. And it was a term that I started adopting. And it was, you have to learn how to have one-on-one time with your soul. And because, and this is just a thought, right? I believe that our souls, when we're sleeping, will go out into the world and connect with other people. But our souls carry knowledge, eternal knowledge. And it's readily available for us because of the way that we're designed.
Yes.
And I do believe that if we can quiet ourselves down, if we can have a moment, those moments, and allow our souls to take us where we need to go, we can have everything that we need, the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience. And I say this because it's going to sound crazy, but you ever walk past someone and you guys make contact like you knew each other before, but you never met that person there in your life? You're just like, oh, how you doing? But you become very friendly with that individual, or you may run across somebody you get a bad feeling like that person has hurt you before, maybe in a past life, maybe their souls, right? Their ancestors, maybe there's a tie there. And I've run across this several times where I was like, I got a real bad feeling about this guy. And there's, it's a side of me that goes, you know what, punch him out or something like that. So there's a lot of control that comes along with that. But it's also, it's something that I figured out. It was a profound truth through that journey, through a deep embedded healing journey, that I realized that this wasn't the first time I was here. It wasn't the first time I was here. And then I began to think, I'm just passing through here again. The truth about my path is I'm not allowed to become attached to people, places, or things. I'm only here to walk you to your next destination. That's why it's really hard for me to take things personal. When people leave and and come into my life, I understand my role, even in the present day, and it came from an understanding from my past and what was passed down through me. I now understand why I am here. And so when you can understand that deep embedded purpose of your journey or journeys, you begin to come up with that with deeper knowledge. And then you begin to look at life, and it takes a little bit. It's hard. It's really hard, right? But if you can quiet your mind, your heart, and your soul, you can begin to open up the books that was passed on to you that's already inside of your DNA. And you can begin to read that and go, whoa, hold on. What is this right here? Whoa, okay. And then that knowledge comes, because we all got here from the things that we've gone through in present day, but we all have knowledge that we don't know where it comes from. And I don't think people really understand it. Like you can pick up a book and read everything that you think that you need. But then there's sometimes that you will pick up a book out of curiosity because the knowledge is there, and you go, you know what, I'm going to like, when I first got my first certification, I looked at it and I went, you know what, I'm gonna get this certification, but I'm not going to read the book, because if this is true and this knowledge is real, then I have all the answers that I need. And I tell you what, the scariest part about it is when I aced it, and I pushed it off to the side and got that certification. I said, you know what, I'm gonna test it again. I'm gonna get my mental health certification, but I'm not gonna read the book. I went in and I aced it again. I went, where is this coming from? I've never once studied these things. And people could go, well, it was your experience that no, I never really thought about this, because no one ever taught me about mental health or addiction or, suicide intervention. And I was like, I've done this before. So the ultimate test was, I said, you know what? There's something about this grief thing. I'm gonna get that certification, but I'm not gonna read the book, right? So it's like I'm setting myself up. And so when I took it, I sat down, didn't get the book. I just went and did the test, and I aced it again. And I sat down and I went, you know what? This cannot be. This cannot be. Because I look at my family now, and no one does what I do. No one in my family does what I do, right? And it's just within like almost the last almost 6 years where I've recently met individuals like yourself and Andre and so many other people that are in the grief field. And I'm going, and I talk with them and I come up with these things. They're like, oh yeah, let's talk about that, right? But I don't know where it comes from, but I enjoy it. So I've embraced that purpose. But that's also, it makes me question, how deep does this go? If I have this knowledge, where was it passed on to me from? And that's when you have that one-on-one time with your soul. And what I reference that to is that's the book that's inside of you. That's the gift that you carry. I went, and I fell in love with it. And I went, you know what? I want more of that. And as strange as it was, because most people will go, grief is not fun. It's not. Look, I come up with a term. And when I say this, people always laugh at me. I go, grief is my lover. Everyone else is my mistress. Mm-hmm. So it's, when I'm with my grief, I'm in love. I'm in love with everything about it. Mm. And it's this love like we were soulmates. I may not be a soulmate to someone in the physical sense, but this thing here, that grief thing, oh, I'm in love with that thing. It's like we go skipping down the yellow brick road together. When we get to our destination, I can sit with it. I can laugh with it. I can see the beauty in the chaos. I call it my beautiful chaotic mess of pain and trauma that I get to go in and actually make sense out of it. And when I can extract that knowledge, I can show up in everyone else's life with that knowledge because I'm a student and then I become a teacher. I can sit with someone else and not understanding exactly their totality of what they're going through. But again, it's almost like I've done this before. I knew how to hold space before I knew how to hold space. I knew how to visit in other people's grief before I even knew what that was. And I knew how to visit. I knew how to sit there and take away the burden of them thinking that they needed to take care of me. And I went, there's something more to this. That's when I to trace that lineage through my blood ties. And I began to break those chains. And every chain that I broke, and I'm still breaking those chains. Every time I break one, more knowledge comes to me. I'm able to show up. And life is not personal. It's not personal. It's not fair. It's not unfair. It's truthful. It's very honest with you. And I began to think, well, why do people struggle with it? Oh, we tell ourselves lies. And when those things begin to not pan out the way that we want to play the victim and want to point the finger at someone else. So I go, well, let's look past that. What if we actually go back to the basics and understand that life is honest? What lies have we told ourselves? Have you forgiven yourselves for the things that you've had expectations for, that you got upset about, that you didn't accomplish, or you was upset that life didn't give you this? Life didn't promise you any of that. So it's a self-awareness and a deep understanding of those unconventional losses. When I lost my son, when he passed away, it was the worst thing I felt that was in my life. Over a period of time, as if I've gone through this before. Where did that come from? Okay, I'm gonna sit with that. Then I realized through a lot of backtracking, past my childhood, past the understanding of generational trauma, I've lost many kids in my life. I've always walked this path of loneliness, but not necessarily lonely, because I've met so many beautiful people throughout that journey that I will see you walking down the street and go, man, why is there a sense of familiarity with you? And you may come up to me and talk to me as if we've known each other our whole entire lives. But what if we have? And I'm just that curious to go, what if we have known each other? I'm excited to get to know who you are, but not just a physical person. Because as you're talking to me, I'm listening to what your soul is saying too. So there's two different conversations going on. I hear what you say, but I'm listening to what you're not saying, because your soul is connecting to mine, and I'm allowing my soul to come out and touch yours. Like, hey, how you doing? It's been a while, right? Yeah, we just in new bodies. Man, what you been up to? So it's totally, I'm like, I'm not going to say anything, but then when I say something, they're like, oh yeah, huh? And I go, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But then they're like, no, I was just, how did you know? I don't know. I'm allowing my soul to talk with you. They know each other. How deep does that go? And it's those chains. It's those chains that you have to break. And every time you break one, you have to connect with the person or that ancestor that you're breaking that chain with. And you have to be able to become what they needed in the moment when they were going through their traumas. And then you come back and you just look at life, and I try not to overcomplicate it when I say these things. And maybe it sounds crazy when I'm saying it, right? But I always feel that there's something to that. I want to make sure that that people understand that this journey, that this soul, the ancestral healing journey, is so deep, meaningful, and profound that it's easy to get wrapped up into a falseness. You have to ask yourself, you have to be searching for that truth. Yeah, searching for that truth. We've all been here before. And it goes back to a term, we're just walking each other home. This is temporary. So I'm not going to be upset when you have to leave before me, because I will see you again. Unless I fulfill my purpose this go around. I can fulfill this purpose this go around, I won't be recycled back in. But I can leave the world with a different understanding and knowledge and connection, not just with myself, but with yourself, Marie, with Andre, and so many other people out there. Because I think that's what we're supposed to, and that's just me. I believe that's what we're supposed to do. And I think we forget how to speak life and love into others and to uplift them in their journey, but also approach it with a sense of humility and humbleness and respect. And you're not like me, I'm not like you. But I love that about you because it's a uniqueness in there. I want to connect to that uniqueness, not in the sense of trying to do harm to you, but a sense of I want to learn who you are. So when I speak of you in a sense of you need to go and really check this person out. Because it's not about me, right? No matter what or how we look at these things, it's never about us. It's how we leave the place. And if we can do better than our ancestors, because before that came along, this earth was a beautiful place. Beautiful place. There was plenty of food and people loved each other. They lived a simple life, hunter-gatherer, right? That whole mentality there. We lived on a barter system. Hey, I have 3 cows. I would trade you these 3 cows for your daughter and a house. So again, it's like, oh, okay, you come from a place of wealth and abundance, right? So it wasn't measured by how much money you had. It was measured by how much you was willing to give in order to get, not how much you was willing to take.
In order to have.
The concept of this cup. How
Yeah.
much can I overfill your cup with what I've learned? And if so, I give it freely. No expectation. I don't want nothing back from you. I'm excited to see whose cup you fill. So it's those simple terms that we carry that I think when we get wrapped up in the present day and the pain and the grief and trauma that we carry, we forget. So here's a strong reminder. Stop forgetting to be a human. And don't try to compare your journey to the next person's journey, because their lineage is going to be different from yours. But you can show up and you can experience that, right? You can definitely experience that from a deeper level and come out of there with a smile and with appreciation and understanding the blessings that you have seen in that yin and yang, the pain and the goodness, the healing and the
It's like the wounds and the healing.
Yeah,
The
it's
wounds
like,
and the healing, right?
and you said, Marie, that wound healing, we all come through a woman.
Yeah.
So whatever our mothers have done, is we're going to carry that. But also they carry theirs through their womb. We all come through that same womb. So it goes back to, what did my great grandmothers go through? God dang it all. Because I need to understand. Because I want to sit with them as a child.
Yeah.
Curious child, full of innocence and profound emptiness.
Tony, if I may, because you just brought something up that's really interesting before we get to the next question. So for me, and as we're having this conversation, it is making me want to break these chains of the ancestral wounds for my children and for their children and their children and their children. And as you had shared, Marie, you know, for women, it comes through what was in our grandmother and our mother while we were in the womb. And then, I mean, there are just so many dysfunctions that I know, not willingly, and I don't think I was fully aware of it, that I passed on to my own children. And if I think back, there were things that my mother, I don't believe willingly, because sometimes we're just so unaware, like how unaware I was with my very first experience of loss and grief when I had lost my father when I was younger. I didn't even understand that pain that I was in. The attachment was to that, you know. Now, okay, fine. I'm going back, going to be 44 decades now to when that happened. And there wasn't conversations like the three of us are having here, or that we're starting to be aware of. You know, I didn't know that those feelings of abandonment, those feelings of fear were attached to that loss and to that trauma. And Tony, you are not only a student and not only a teacher, but you are a phenomenal example, especially, you know, I don't want to separate the genders, but in truth, you really are a beautiful example for men to be comfortable. Because for women, you know, we can, I don't know, I don't want to speak for Marie, but for my set and my little crew that I've grown up with, I know that women, we can talk about lots of different things. Sometimes they're uncomfortable. You may have one or two friends in your group that aren't comfortable about talking about certain things. But men in general, you are conditioned to not have these conversations. I mean, we're all conditioned as humans to bury the pain deep within us. But men, I believe, it's like, let's like 10x it or more for men. So it brings me true joy to be a part of this series and for us to be having this dialogue, because it really is so very necessary. People need to be understand self-awareness is key, but most of us are the sleeping sheep, and we haven't even stepped in to that space of the awakening, the waking up to, and becoming self-aware. So I truly want to say thank you.
I've loved everything we've both shared, and I agree, Andrea. Like, there's this divine masculine that's balanced in your emotional side, which is, I like to break things down for people to understand that everything is energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tony, yes. As you are diving deep into the ocean of your heart, the ocean of your soul, and allowing yourself to sit with these emotions, feelings, questions, to be in that expression of questioning, of allowing your imagination to go, well, how else can things happen? That's a lot of the feminine essence. And then we think about, that's the feeling side, the nurturing side, the expressive side, and we then can execute that with our masculine, which is the doing and the actioning, and then they get to dance together. So I agree with you. It's been beautiful to just hear your experiences, and I agree with a lot of everything you're both saying. And there was something that you said, Tony, about there was so much in there with the pain and the pleasure, and your take on loving the grief.
Loving the grief.
Loving the grief. This is part of the integration of what unconditional love looks like. And if everything on this plane is an existence of it and an expression of love, and you've got bliss and, a beautiful life down this end, and over down here, you've got all the horrible things that can happen to a human that we just want to shun away, and we don't even want to look at, and things that get us angry, things that happen to children and women, and that side. How can we forgive that and come to a terms of loving that this is still an expression for us to witness in the collective and learn to forgive that? I think, and that's a hard thing, because when atrocities happen, maybe to your own children or to yourself, and again, these are taboo things, whether it's rape, murder, imprisonment, all of these things that can happen that put people in these chains and these cycles. How do you have the courage to notice? And again, it's that art of detachment you were talking about, Tony. How can you detach yourself and learn from that experience to go, I still chose this lesson, even though it was a horrible one. So what is the lesson for me? If you have that self-awareness and that depth, to see that as a gift, to see that as like, well, now I understand what that, and it could again be karmic. It could be something that happened in a past life that then the roles were reversed. And if we again take a step back, right, and we go into this, well, what if everything was like a play and we're the main characters of our play? What if, like, in my design of my life, I actually chose that villain? That would be really hard for that being to play that villain for me. If you were the director, I chose that person to do that thing to me. I chose this. What if we chose all of these things and agreed with them on a soul level, that I'm going to learn what envy is like through you. I'm actually going to learn what backstabbing is like, because I did that to you maybe in this life. I'm actually going to learn what feeling violated feels like through this experience, so that I can come at a sense of empowerment. And again, it's that detachment. It's not nice to go through it. And I'm not, but I suppose in that self-awareness, like for me, the miscarriages, there was a piece of feeling violated by the doctors in the experience I had, that I know they were doing the things they were to kind of, because I was hemorrhaging and the pain in that moment and the unexpectedness, but I chose that. And I also feel like the babies that I lost were gifting me this experience so that I could come back to the deeper questioning and to come back into understanding who I be at a soul level, and the womb wisdom that came online, the blood wisdom that came online. Because like you said, Tony, in our blood, there is a book, and that accesses the universe. And this is how powerful and potent we are when we remember. And that's why we can remember these things that we think, how did I do that? Because it's not only ancestral. This is God. God's given us, universe has given us, source, whatever you're back, it doesn't matter. We've got all of the gifts and the remembrances, but we are required to remember. And so I suppose, in a nutshell, that suffering, that pain, all of the atrocities, to sit with those emotions and to sit through the learnings is painful. And the human existence, the quickest way for us to learn and to evolve, unfortunately, is through pain and suffering.
It's to sit and process it. But we don't want to as humans. We don't want to, do we?
Next question, though, right? And it's a great segue. Thank you for the comments over there on Instagram, my brother. Thank you, and I definitely appreciate you for allowing me to be with you in your beginning stages of grief. And I'm always here, brother. So I definitely appreciate that. If you have any questions that you would like to ask any of the panelists, please put them in there. We'll answer them as we go along. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you always for the support as well. It goes. This is going to be a great segue into this question, and the question is, what does this statement mean? We carry the hurt and the pain from our forefathers as mothers. What does that? When you hear a statement like that, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, immediately it's like, okay, yes, give me the challenge, because that's why I'm here, so I can alchemize it and I can turn them into blessings. Because the hurt and the pain, and through my own experience, like I'm 38 and I feel like I've had lifetimes and lifetimes through the quickening process of these awakenings of remembering. But I find every lifetime I remember the essence of who I am. And so I feel like my soul has chosen this depth of the hurts and the pain, because I know I get to turn them into something beautiful, because this world is beautiful. And in recognizing it, this conversation is beautiful. And also, at the same time, it can be painful. And these hurts, it's this piece around, well, if I can do this for myself, then I can be that light to show others that they can choose to turn it and alchemize it and transform it into something else. If you think about a bushfire here in Australia and other parts of the world, when sometimes bushfires, chaos, the hurt, the trauma comes through, the rebirth that can happen after that, there is so much life, fertility, there's a fertileness in the chaos. There's a fertileness in the pain that allows newness to grow. And we get to do that with our souls and our sovereignty and create something magical and powerful and humble and beautiful in this lifetime now. So it's good to remember the ancestors and past lives and things, but the power of being human and to bring these remembrances online now, imagine what our bodies can do. Imagine what we are capable of when we come together. And so these hurts are a gift, and that's what comes through for me.
Andre, you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So the sins of the father falling upon the children. And if I think about if I look at myself, we touched on this previously, but if I look at myself and I look at my own, I'm just going to call it dysfunctions. My sins are dysfunctions. My inappropriateness, the things that I have done and how they've touched my son and how they've touched my daughter, which does make me think back to further back. I never knew my grandparents on either my mother or my father's side because I knew my grandfather on my mother's side, but he had passed when I was 4, and the other grandparents were already passed on. But if I think about my parents and their challenges of what they had in terms of their own lives, I can see how the sins of their ancestors, which obviously are my ancestors, fell upon them, and the struggles and the challenges that they had. Now, if my parents were alive today, they would be into their hundreds. So it's of a very different generation on where we were as humans in the evolutionary journey of the human brain and of our mind. As a mother, and I think it really only happened to me when I became a mother, did I better understand my parents, because I certainly didn't understand them prior to having children. So it makes me wonder, did my parents really ever understand their parents, or did that only happen for them when they became parents, so on and so on and so on? And I really hope my son and daughter give me some grace, because I really don't want any more of my sins. And that's the whole purpose of my work, is to break those chains, is to break it now for Ryan and Natalie, because they have been harmed. I never did things intentionally. Like my parents didn't do things intentionally. My grandparents didn't, so on and so on and so on. But as we're conditioned by society, as we're so conditioned, it is for us. And I can see how purposeful today is, and the role that each of us individually play, and now collectively here together. It's very purposeful, because these conversations are so necessary, Tony. Like when I first saw your post in the Facebook group, really about men speaking on grief, really any conversations around grief? Very few, and very hard to find. I mean, there was none when my father passed. So then 18 years later, when my husband passed, there was starting to be an awakening. And there was more for parents who had lost children than there were for young people who had lost a spouse. So we need to continue this, and we need to normalize. We need to normalize pain. We need to normalize the processing of pain. We need to actually also, I think, normalize the sins, because the sin is just missing the mark. And if we take away the stigmas and the shame from it, we can come together like the three of us are doing here today and have this amazing conversation and share of our own unique experiences, because it's like that little saying goes, sharing is caring. So in order for the sins of the father, now I don't know, because again, my parents are both passed on, so I can't in the natural go to them to ask of stories. And I was so young when my dad passed, there was no interest in me to know of those prior generations. And so now it comes, and again, I can't really ask in the natural to them. In the spiritual, for sure, I can touch them. For sure. Like when Tony explained that process to me when I was on his podcast, of that, when he sat and he first started this process of going to his lineage and going to the generations prior, I thought, man, Tony, you are onto something, young man. Oh, yeah. Because it's so important, Tony. And you've recognized it and you're sharing it. I recognize it. I know Maria's recognized it, which is why she said yes to join us today.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that. I just wanted, before we wrap up, I have a really deep, profound question. I want to get your thoughts about this.
Okay.
What if everything that we're experiencing in this life, everyone, is repeated? It's been repeated before through lineage.
Yeah.
What if like everything that we're experiencing? Because if we think about the words that have been written in a lot of books, the Bible, the Mormon book, all of these things. You cannot share a story that someone else hasn't already gone through.
Most definitely. So wait, so just so I get clarification. So do you mean almost like in a parallel universe or in our past,
If we're talking about blood ties, right? Life repeats itself. This
Yes, it does.
is throughout time.
Yeah.
Now, time does not exist. It's just a story. And sometimes we will repeat things until we realize it's time to stop the repetition. And then life will take you down a different path. In order to truly heal, if you can recognize the signs of the repetition that's happening, you can then turn and go, no, I am not going to respond or have an emotional reaction to this person because I need to stop that, right? It comes back in you and it tests you a little bit just to make sure that you're good, that you got it down pat, and you make it remarkable. Guess what? Repetition stops, right? Every loss that we've ever encountered, there's nobody that we know that hasn't encountered something similar. People in the family have lost fathers and mothers, children, cousins, friends, etc. Right? We do the same thing. What happens, I think, that we forget that these things are happening and it's a normal thing for it to happen. So why do we forget to have a response instead of a reaction? If it's repetition, maybe if we choose to take the emotion out of it and begin to live in the response.
So we can count on you, Tony, for the depth of the question.
Right?
Well,
went.
I love this question because it comes back to breaking the bonds of the cycles. And so, yes, we can shift it. And if we think the time is on this plane of existence, the eternal now, in noticing the trauma of your childhood, you can go back in the now to make that little boy or that little girl feel seen and heard in your own mind, in your own experience for yourself. Because the inner child, you talked about the innocence and this purity of coming back in, you can heal yourself when you go back and go through a variety of different processes. Yes, you can talk to your parents and your lineage. There's a beautiful process of like holding your mother's lineage on your left, your father's lineage on your right, and you can sit and you can talk and bring them in. And I think this lifetime, the whole universe is watching us. Souls are lining up to be in this age and this time now because we are doing something phenomenal in breaking a universal pattern. And Earth has been put to the edge for a reason. And there's a deeper reason and there's a deeper protection around what's happening here and the souls that are here now. And so when we choose to become self-aware, when we choose to notice the hurts, the traumas, the sins, and alchemize that and choose love, and to know that everybody's stories is part of them, but it's also not. And it's that dissonance again and that separation of the emotional body. And it's at the same time owning that. And this is the polarity of existing in this. Yes, we can break it. Yes, we can change it. I had a whole lifetime came through not long ago about being Marie Antoinette, and my name is Marie, and I never even thought about the French Revolution. But this piece around revolution, in conversations, my husband and I were talking about the world and the things, and there was this deep piece about, I'm here to be part of this revolution and break the old ways of the death, the trauma, and soul breaking level. And it was burdensome, but it's also this responsibility when you become, but it's also releasing the responsibility and being in the polarity of these. I have to do this for my lineage and my family in the future. And also I get to just be an experience has been, again, an internal battle for me where it's like, I have to be the savior in this martyr complex that I have been breaking pattern after pattern after pattern for lifetimes.
Yes,
And it's like, I just get to be me. And if that reminds others, and I'm breaking that story of being the martyr, because that was very much in my patterning as being a teacher, doing everything for others, as a mother, It's like, no, I don't have to be that. I just get to exist and get to live and get to be in joy and get to be in the pain and enjoy this fruitful abundance of experience.
Yes.
In all of it. That's why we're here.
And all this blessing and beauty, right? If you can look beyond the physicality of people, places, and things, and you can see the moving parts. I always believe that life is this moving blueprint. There's pieces being removed, there's pieces being put in, but everything kind of works in conjunction with everything else. And it goes back to a philosophy that I developed when I first started my company, and I didn't know anything. I thought about it. I went, what is it called when you create things out of nothing, just a thought? Well, it changes the laws of physics. Why does it change the laws of physics? Because now the laws of physics no longer applies to you. If you could take that and look at lineage and breaking those chains and things like that, if you can take away the chains of physics and
there's
the
freedom
behind it, it opens up the doors for you to not only, as you said, Maria and Aldrin, to have unconditional love, but it starts with yourself, because you cannot depend on someone else to love you unconditionally, because we teach people how to love us.
Absolutely.
If we don't love ourselves unconditionally,
Mm.
cannot expect someone else to do it, because they're watching you to know how to love you or know how to care for you. Are you showing up every day in your life, not worried about nothing else but your life? Are you really listening to the song that your heart and your soul of that frequency that is carrying you? Are you taking necessary steps to elevate that by also listening to the songs that your ancestors have sang? Music has been universal since day one, right? So are you truly listening to the words that they're telling you? Because they're telling you secrets that people have long forgotten, but you know them, right? And it goes to something else. And when I say this, hopefully it makes sense. Trust is earned. What I mean by that, in this process that we go through, we meet many people and we want so bad to trust them, right? I think the question would be, do you trust yourself? Have you earned the trust within yourself in order to take a deep dive into your own personal healing journey? Are you trusting your body, your soul, to do what you need to do? Are you connecting the head and the body together? Are you trusting yourself in total to do exactly what you need to do? Because instinctively, you already know. So and that goes back into that really deep soul healing. Do you trust yourself to go that deep and actually begin to question and enjoy the answers? Because you may not like all the answers, but can you accept the answers and show up in present day and respond to the person?
Yeah, and it comes back to the body, as you were saying, and the nervous system. Our nervous system is how we experience the world around us, through sight, touch, feeling, sense. And I know we're over time, but I love this conversation.
No, you're good. You're good. Go.
But even like we think, so in order not to be reactive and to sit with and notice your feelings, we have feelings for a reason. Like our emotions are energy in motion. They're here to be felt. But to cultivate a calmness and a sense of control in your nervous system, I found through breath work and allowing that oxygen to come through, to really notice the feelings that are coming through, to come back into clarity of talking to people when things are heightened. It's a lot of it comes back to noticing your emotions, emotional intelligence, and regulation, so that when you have a loss or a intense moment, maybe it's an argument, in order to shift that, maybe it's with your parents, maybe it's with a partner or a loved one, maybe it's with your children, and you want to break these patterns of snapping at them or repeating, like maybe you're going into a cycle of like, oh, I'm not good enough and I'm just going to shut up now. How can you breathe into it and allow yourself the time and space to just maybe pause, or to walk away from a situation, or to say your piece without making the other, like, it's from your feelings. Like, the I am statements are great. So cultivating your nervous system so that you can be in your body, so that you can tackle the very human things that trigger us, that maybe our actions and our behaviors put us in these patternings that we've been talking about, that you want to break within yourself, is a part of self-mastery that only you can do. Like you said, Tony, it's this truth within you. Are you willing to go deep and go, actually, I gaslight people, or I actually trigger that in my mother, and to own that part of your sins, and to own that part of maybe your self, and face that and go, actually, yeah, I didn't realize I did that, but I'm going to work towards like changing the attitudes, behaviors, and patterns in the very physical 3D part of ourselves, because then you start to embody and shift change. When you start to notice, you speak into it and you feel it, and you take then different actions. You decide and choose things differently. And these are, I suppose, the more tangible things that we as humans can do. Because we can listen to the whispers, but if you're not going to do anything about it, then it goes on deaf ears. So what are you going to do? And learn to embody, learn to master for yourself. And this part on loving yourself, there is a sacred selfishness that I heard from someone that I really loved. You have to pour into yourself first before you can for your children or your partner or loved one or the community. Because if your cup is empty, how are you going to give?
There's nothing to give.
Yeah.
It's like when you're on an airplane and the flight attendant is, before the plane takes off. And they're always, they're telling you about the oxygen mask. And if you're traveling with children or with, anybody who needs you, define that however you want. What do they say? You need to put that oxygen mask on yourself first. But through our traumas, I think, and through our wounds and the ancestral wounds and the ancestral traumas, I think it's kind of created this falsity and this illusion that we are meant to be and do and have for others. And like you had said, Marie, it's that whole martyr syndrome. No, I must do. Yes, we must. There is a requirement. We don't walk the earth alone. We're walking with others, and we create these families. But we're not here to be martyrs. Absolutely not. And we do need to take care of ourselves. And we do need to understand what it means to love and to love oneself, to love others.
And then you can serve from that full cup. Then you can serve others, which is, again, that essence and the remembrance of, like, if I am in love with myself, if I feel full, nourished, all of this, then people will feel that energy exude out. That's magnetic. People will feel the love. And you see people in the world that are like, wow, what do they have in them? And you feel how beautiful and giving and loving they are, but then they also need to look after themselves as well in order to do that. And then we're not telling the stories that everyone is taking from me. And then we shift the narrative, we shift our character within. And these are the lessons we get to, attach to and detach to. So you got to, it's that, again, that polarity of you got to feel it and then you got to let it go, surrender, release, and then you come back into it. So it's this constant, collapse and expand,
Right.
which is like the DNA in our blood. We're always
Exactly.
Yes.
That DNA, that if you look at DNA and how it turns, if you can compare that and really dive deeper into it and you can see the design, it's something that we all carry. We all have a middle, but we also have an outer design that's so similar to everything else. Like, it was posed a question to me: have you ever heard a tree cry? No? Well, it does when you cut it down. We all share the same design. And that's just the connection that we have. But then it's understanding the deepness, depthness of it, right? Of how that system works. How does it compare to the system that we are in, or the animals, or the sky, the water, etc.? We all share that same design. We just have different middle elements. And the reason is because we lost the language. And it boils down to that. When we talk about ancestral healing those traumas and things like that, is understanding the language that is being spoken through your blood ties. That's just my thoughts. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm just sharing my thoughts on it, right? Maybe someone else has a different opinion about that, and I'm okay with that, right? Because for one, the one thing I've always learned was that there's no right or wrong way of doing this. You have to choose what works for you, but be open to the knowledge that's shared with you, because maybe there's a piece of the puzzle that you didn't think about. And this is what these conversations this series is all about, is bringing a different understanding of the deepness of the healing that you can have in order to break the chains, so you're not carrying that, or you're not passing that along to your children and their children's children. And maybe we can see a change in their abundance through the example of us, right? But we also have the example already laid behind. We just have to be able to connect the blueprint, that individualized blueprint, and all the pieces that have already been put there, and removing those broken sprockets, those broken springs, and putting some new stuff in there to see how it operates. And that's just a simple way of just looking at it. And again, that's just me, because again, we all look at life differently. We all look at life differently because we look at them through two lenses. But now there's a third one. We look at them through our eyes. We look at them through our soul's eyes, but we don't look at it through our third eye. And that's where the connection lies. For those who are on the spiritual journey, they will understand how that aligns. You have to quiet everything in order to receive your teachings. Because we're all students. Are you going to be the class clown? Are you going to be a D student? Are you going to be that A student that everyone makes fun of and call you a nerd? Are you going to be the solid one that still makes ABs and A's all across the board, but don't look for the recognition, but look for the ways of using it in order to serve? And I think that's where we have the individual uniqueness between each other. How do you show up, and what do you want to do with it? I chose to serve. I chose to serve unconditionally and without expectations to those who need me. Not to be attacked or to take anything from you, but to give you something. So you can maybe take that, and when you get to a place of true strength, maybe you can hand that off to someone else. I don't need your recognition. I just need you to show up for you. Be selfish with yourself. Not, and understand that it's okay. If you don't connect with anyone, don't pick up habits that you don't need. Don't deter from your true self. Look for your authenticity and strive for that. And everything else will work itself out. Those who need to be with you will be with you. Those who don't, allow them to leave. And let the ancestors rest. So you can, in turn, in present day, have peace. Because when you have peace, people feed off of that. And be more susceptible to be open to some healing, the work, the servitude. Then we can truly give. But again, those are just my thoughts.
I love that, Tony. I love that.
So, and I say that so because I don't want to push my beliefs on anyone or anything like that. So I'm very careful and very
Well, you're very respectful. You're very respectful and understand.
Saying that these are just my thoughts, because there are going to be people out there that may believe in something different. I respect all of that. I do. As a matter of fact, let's sit down and talk, because I want to learn too. I'm a kid. I'm excited. Let's teach me. Maybe you teach me that. Maybe I can give you something in return. If you don't want it, I'm okay with that too. Give it to me. I'm like a little sponge. Let's read the book together, right? You know what I'm saying? And I will shut my mouth and go, let's just explore you. Your whole entirety. Let's just explore you. Not me. It's not about me. I want to get to know you, because I want to know how to better, one, respect you, two, and love you, and three, how can I sit within your presence and be a visitor in your moments without making it personal? And I think that's where these conversations are going to go.
I love that.
We got to wrap up and everything. Marie, I want to say, I know it's early where you are, and I want to say thank you for being here today. Thank you to my co-host. It's been beautiful. For everyone who's been tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, all these different places. Guys, thank you for tuning in. And we got many more coming. But before I let you go, tell people where they can find you.
Well, thank you, Tony and Andrea, for this beautiful conversation. I love these conversations. There's power in exploring people's stories and their thoughts and their truths. And there's a difference, I feel, when you feel their hearts come through. So I feel like this topic leads beautifully. Like, I have a beautiful academy called Awaken Academy with my co-founder Felicia Lee, and Awaken is the old Latin term to mean awaken. And so these types of conversations we have on our podcast, I'd love to have you both on there too. And we do global summits, we do events, and we also create courses and curriculum that dive into this self-mastery. How do we tap into the elements? How do we access our ancestors? How do we bring that tangibly into this 3D world and become more holistically online? So if folks want to follow me, you can check me out on Facebook as Marie Ferguson, or check out Awaken Academy. I'm on Instagram as Marie_N_Ferguson. And I'd love to connect. Like, I love talking to people and hearing your stories. And just thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Marie. And thank you for showing up on Sunday. I believe it is for you. Saturday for us. It's now what, 5:30 in the morning for you? So truly grateful. Tony, a big heartfelt thank you to you. This is really a blessing to be a part of this, for us to have created this and to be moving forward with this and knowing that this is going to be shifting lives. So thank you both.
Oh, before you go, Andrew, where can people find you as well?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Andrea Brunswick, on Instagram, Andrea Brunswick, and on Facebook, it's Andrea Julia Brunswick. And I'm there and DM me. Oh, and you know what? Somebody, I was on a podcast the other day and they're like, so what's your email address? Because I never give my email address. But if you ever want to email me, it's AndreaJuliaBrunswick@gmail.com.
Awesome.
And until I get another website, these are the places in which I reside.
And you guys know, I'm Tony Lang, the host, and my beautiful, wonderful co-host and my guest. We have so much more coming in the next couple of weeks. So you guys tune in for that. And if you haven't already, go ahead and get registered for it. You guys already know. You can find me on YouTube, The Great Let's Talk About It podcast. You can watch all the episodes there, one-on-ones, etc. If you need, I'm looking for support, you guys can go to my website, www.mensgriefsupport.org. Other than that, you guys, thank you for your support. And also, I want to celebrate a big thing that just happened. It's a big thing for me and a big thing for the podcast. We just reached 300 subscribers. So thank you guys for that. I know it may not seem like a lot, but for me, this is
that is fantastic.
Thank you. Help us keep getting these messages out there. Tune in, share, get them to the YouTube, have them subscribe. And as always, guys, go check them out. My beautiful guest, my co-host, myself, and look forward to the next one. It's going to conclude this episode of the Ancestral Healing. This is part 2 will be in the next couple of weeks. You guys are going to enjoy it well. So we see you guys there. Enjoy your day. Stay cool. Create some laughs and enjoy the people that you're around. And just remember, healing is just not what you see. It goes a little bit deeper than that. I'm going to help you guys get there. You guys have a great day. Peace.
Bye.